Hi everyone, so something pretty exciting has happened today, which is my package has arrived from Burnley and Trowbridge. And this is exciting for a number of reasons for me because this is my first official order from them. And what I mean by official order is I've purchased watches and stuff from them before, and I've also purchased, I think, silk stockings from them, yeah. But I've never purchased like a bulk amount of fabric for a specific project. So this is very exciting to finally get to work with that company on a specific item. So I ordered everything from them. I got the fabric, the cotton tape, and some very specific thread for this project, which I believe was cotton thread. Wow, did I get cotton or wool thread? Not wool. Yeah, I think it was cotton thread. So let's talk about what our project is today before I opened up the package. So what I'm going to be working on is making an 18th century shift, and I'm going to be making it as historically accurate as I can. So yeah, that means a ton of hand sewing, which I always get nervous about because I'm always like, well, I know the machine is better than me, but I am going to do my best to make this a very functional outfit that stays together for many years. So to talk about that a bit more too, I am going to be using Patterns of Fashion 5 by Janet Arnold because, and I will show this in more detail in a minute, but in this book, which I know it's mostly about stays, corsets, bodies, there is in this book, in the earlier part, a section that briefly shows an original document talking about shifts from the 18th century. So we're going to use that to basically try and draw a pattern for ourselves. But we'll get to that in a minute. So now that we've gone over what we're making, let's open up this package and look at what we've gotten. So shifts were made historically from linen back in the 18th century. So I went with, of course, a linen, and I tried to do as much research as I could on how heavy a linen to get. And you have to be really careful because it's basically, a lot of companies don't talk about the ounce of linen, so it's really hard to find out like what they mean when they say lightweight linen, midweight linen. So some companies lightweight linen is too light, and some companies midweight linen is too heavy. So it was really hard to decide, but that's kind of why I went with Burnley and Trowbridge, because they know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, and they know who they're marketing to, which is mostly historical garment makers. So I went with them and I got this linen, which is gorgeous. I may have gotten a bit too heavy of a linen. I just was a bit worried. I didn't want to go with like something. No, I remember why. I couldn't go with the lightweight because it was really kind of beigey. The only stuff they had in stock was a bit too beigey for me. But this is really nice. This is a nice cream linen, and I think it's not going to be too heavy. I think it'll be fine. And we'll look at that a bit closer in a minute, but see, I don't think it's too heavy because you can still somewhat see the silhouette of my hand through it. I don't know if that's picking up on the camera. And to me that means it's the right sort of weight. So it's beautiful. So I did actually order Londonderry linen thread, and it was suggested that I went with the 83. I don't know what that means. It is like 50 meters, so 165 feet. It's quite a bit of thread for this smaller project, but I can certainly use this in the future. So we have everything to get started, so super exciting. And I guess let's go ahead and switch camera views and let's go and talk about the book where it shows what the pattern should look like, and we will begin discussing how to draft said pattern. It's exciting! I guess I'm just gonna go with kind of a basic patterning. I imagine the lines are essentially where our seams will go. Now, the reason I'm using this and not looking at medieval stuff is because the big importance was back in the 18th century, shifts started becoming short-sleeved, while before that they were still pretty long-sleeved. So essentially, what it looks like is that we have 3 or 4 pattern pieces. I'm going to go with figure 14 because that looks the easiest, which just looks basically like a big square that they cut out the neckline as such. And then we have these, which are, what's the word for them? Oh my goodness, I can't think. Not gores. Are they gores? No. Wow, I can't think of the name. But we have these triangle pieces that we will fit into, I guess, like widen it. And then of course we have a sleeve, which honestly, like with a pattern like this, I'd imagine the sleeves are just squares. Now, this is where I'm confused. They have this little dark triangle. I assume that must be the underarm gusset as such. So the way I'm going to do the measurements is, so obviously this one is just the general length of how long we want it. I'm going to say 37 inches. Okay, so 37 inches. Now for this part, what you're going to want to do is take whatever the widest part of your chest is, or your torso, I should say. So for me, that's my bust line. Divide it in half, and then you can add just 2 inches, but I want to be a little on the safe side and add like 3, because I'd rather have it be a little big than too small. So for me, that is, okay, so for me that is 21, which does seem a little big. Maybe, I don't know, I'd say 20 to 21. Arm, that's just going to be wherever you want your sleeve to end. I'll take that measurement later. Now for this piece, I'm going to have to figure out, once I cut out my square, how long I want my inset to be. Is that what it's called? Oh, why can't I think of the name for this? So it's funny, they look like they have it almost going all the way up to where the arm gusset is. So for the underarm gusset, I believe that it's supposed to be like 3 by 3. If it's not, I will tell you guys later. But alright everyone, I just wanted to pop back over to the book to talk about this. So my first mock-up, I tried doing this style, and I don't really like it. I actually, and looking at this one, like if you notice, here, let me, I don't want to focus, but if you notice, they actually show it with the triangle being built into it instead of being a side piece. So I'm actually going to try that, I think, for my second attempt. Everything else will stay the same, except I'm getting rid of the triangles and I'm just going to include them in to the cut, which it shows doing this, so I know they did it. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and try that mock-up. So this is the second mock-up attempt, and you'll see what I meant by having the triangle pieces built in to it. I don't go into a whole lot of detail in the mock-up just because, you know, I feel like I've really already talked about it a lot. With your actual fabric, don't fold it over like this. I'm going to be much neater, but this is just a mock-up, so. Alright everyone, it is day 2 and it is still cold outside. So after doing 2 mock-ups yesterday, I decided that my favorite pattern was actually the second one that I briefly talked about, figure 16, on the little diagram sheet, which is the one that basically starts out going straight like a square, and then once you hit where your armpit point should be, flares out into the triangle. So it includes the triangular parts into the shift. I felt more comfortable in that one, and quite frankly I think it looked better after being all sewn up, because you didn't have a bunch of seams in it, like you just had one side seam. And yeah, okay, so it's not that important, it's an undergarment, but I think overall too it will be easier to hand sew less than more. So as far as measurements go, the only major changes I needed to make was I decided that I want my armpit gussets to be, or armhole gussets, instead of being 3 by 3 inches, I decided to make them 4 by 4 inches, because I actually think that gives me more sewing room and space, which I did do that on the second mock-up, and it just looked nicer because I had more room to work with. The other one I want to be a bit careful about is I kept cutting my neckline really big, a lot bigger than I realized it. So I'm going to go small at first, because we can always make it bigger when I'm trying it on. I can't add fabric as easily, because yeah, I was like, even on the one that I didn't cut that big of a head hole, it was like way over here, and I'm like, whoa, it's like because of it was falling off of me. So I need to tone that down a little bit and just cut a little tiny one, because I'll cut into it later. The other thing I wanted to mention is you will probably need to take your hip measurements if you're going to do this. Like, I thought I could get away with just my bust, but when I was trying them on, like the first one almost didn't fit over my hips, and I was like, oh yeah, and I've got kind of wide hips, so that's kind of important to keep in mind. And this is not a stretchy fabric, obviously, so you'll just have to figure out on your pattern where your hips will roughly fall. It's fairly basically just measure from like the top of the shoulder, that would be the top of the square, to where your widest hip part is, and just make sure that you're making it wide enough for your hips. And you do put it over your head, so you don't have to worry about the upper part, just where the flare is. So other than that, yeah, all the other measurements are great. Depending on how much linen fabric I have, I may make mine a little longer. It was hitting right at the knee, and I actually wanted it to be probably about 5 inches longer, so I will change that too. And that's it. I think that is the only changes that need to be made. For the most part though, everything was pretty much how I thought it would be. As far as sleeve length goes, I'm going to stick with 7 inches, because again, I can make it shorter if I don't want it that long. So I really don't have much else to talk about, so as scary as it is time to begin cutting our good linen fabric.
So we are back to the infamous neck hole. Basically, I just measured my neck, and I went really small to my neck measurements, so at least my head can get in. And this is me drafting up the sleeves, which the way I got this measurement was I just took the circumference of my underarm and shoulder, and you can see I've marked the lines, but I'm going a little over it, so I have plenty of space. And this is those new armhole gussets at 4 by 4 inches. So glad I made this change, but I am going in about an inch, no, a ½ inch, so that I know where to sew, because these lines are going to be super helpful for you in the future. And this is all my supplies, because we are ready to actually start sewing. So we've got our thread, thimble, beeswax, that's super important, tiny scissors, though you can use big scissors. And when you use linen thread, you must wax it. And I usually start from the middle and wax it about 2 to 3 times going out on each. The first seam that I sew up is the shoulder seam at the top. And I do all my stitch work in just a basic back stitch. So yeah, we'll start with the shoulder seams first. I also then go over each seam by flat felling it down. This is very historical to 18th century, and it just keeps everything sort of extra secure and nice and tidy on the inside.
Okay everyone, so this I think is going to be the harder part of kind of figuring out what I'm doing. So here's my gusset, and we're ready to, this is my whole underarm seam, and it's now time to figure out how to flat felt it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to felt just this first section here. Then I will felt this one and continue it on all the way up the underarm seam. Okay. Okay everyone, so I've gone ahead and done that, and unfortunately my first one was a bit bulky because I forgot to trim the part that I was bending over, but when you look at it from the other side you're not going to notice it. Like, you don't notice the bulkiness. I wish I could get it in better. It's like I have too much light or not enough light. But it turned out really well, like flat felling it on this side, and it looks neat and tidy on the inside and on the outside. So here's how the stitching work looks. Came out pretty good. Like I said, my first one was a bit bulky, so but I think it's actually nice, and I gotta trim a few flyaways that made it out from underneath my flat felling, but I'm pretty happy with how that turned out, considering I had no idea I was gonna do the gussets. Well, I had no idea how to flat fell the gussets, so so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do up the other sleeve. Probably have to call it a night because, as you can see, it's very dark. It's already hard to film even in the day because it's so overcast. So I'm gonna just go ahead and sew up the other seam off, the other sleeve off camera, and call it a night.
So I'm just going to go over real quick how to attach the sleeve to the rest of your shift. So we're going to start by attaching the very top of your sleeve to where the shoulder seam is, and you're going to pin it all the way down to that triangular peak of the gusset, and you're going to sew from one peak all the way over to the other peak. I hope that makes sense. But you want to sew this separately and then do up your whole side seam afterwards. And that's pretty much it. So let's take a look. Here is how she turned out, and I'm very happy with it. It is a bit wrinkled, I forgot to iron it, but oh well, that's linen for you. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell, and I will see you next time.